This is for Shlomo, for all the injured in Israel that were injured that have been injured, soldiers that have been injured in the in the line of duty, and other people, or terrorist attacks and other things, and a general refer for people recovering from procedures and treatments.
More importantly, Kev, in addition to that, I wanted to add, because tomorrow afternoon we're doing a shir for Ian Shapiro, the late Ian Shapiro, because it will be at 5 o'clock, so it'll be by Mincha. But Arthur lost a dear friend of his. I'm just sharing the screen, and I just want him to. Just give me a second, Arthur. I've got the picture. Give me 1 second. Do my best to share it.
Right. Did you get the baggie? The car was full of shit. You didn't even pour.
Okay. Arthur, would you like to just talk to us?
Yeah, so this lady, her name is Marsha. Okay, I was helping her heal her wounds for like, 8 or 9 months, like every day. But her kidneys were in failure and they got worse and worse. But eventually she went on to dialysis. And that was still okay. She was fine there. She was losing a lot of weight. She had gone massive from the water retention. And then she fell and she fractured 2 ribs on her left-hand side and broke her femur. And the only way they could heal it was to give her a shoulder replacement, and they couldn't do it because of the kidney condition. She was a lawyer from the States for many, many years. She retired 10 years ago at the age of 66, or 11 years ago. And she actually used to work defending people that were in malpractice. You know, so she had a firm with the brother's wife, and her had a massive firm together. They were all lawyers. And, you know, she came to Israel because her brother said, I can't keep traveling back and forth, because his wife was sick. She was a pastor in October. And she decided to make Aliyah 2 years ago. And she decided on Tuesday that she had spoken to hospital and stuff, and she was in constant pain, really agony all the time, throwing up, not good at all. It wasn't getting better. She decided to stop the dialysis on Thursday, and then by Friday she passed away at 3:30 in the afternoon. And I had a close relationship with her for a very long time. I used to go visit her, just say hi and chat to her, even though I wasn't looking at her all the time, but just to say hello to her, because she was off my street. She was a good friend.
Well, I'm sorry, Arthur. I wish you.
That's good. No, she looked big. I mean, I'll miss her, but I know she's not in agony and suffering. I mean, that's life is not life if it's not quality of life.
I agree. And in the merit of that, let's do some learning for both Klal Yisrael, Eretz Yisrael, and her late Neshama. So why don't Kevin, you get started and teach us? Thanks.
You want to wait for Gavin? Gavin's not back yet.
Yeah, I can see. I'm not sure where he is.
Should I just go in to start anyway?
No, I'd like to wait for a minute for him, and then here he is.
Oh, here we go. Okay, that is good.
I can't hear Gavin. Gavin, you're
on mute.
Okay.
There we go.
No, Damon must have muted me. I didn't mute myself. Did you mute me, Damon? Probably.
No, but I did, because you used an F-bomb in the share.
A what?
F-bomb about when you went to go for the courier guy. You used a special word. You swore, Gav. Kevin will tell you, we laughed, but you swore.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that.
So
Okay.
can I ask you a favor? Once you teach us, can I send a new link and we'll get immediately into it? I'm going to go as quickly as I can, guys. I promise you.
Okay, so after this, we're going to send the link. No, this is
Alright.
going to be not. This is going to be long.
Sure.
Okay, so this week's parsha is Parshat Vayera, and it concludes with the final 5 plagues against Egypt, or to try to convince Paro to let the Jewish people go. And during the plague, he's very upset. Every plague, he's very upset and he remorseful. This is you let them go, and then as soon as the plague ends, or let's say, for instance, when the locusts all disappeared after they decimated and destroyed all the crops and everything in their wake, he changed his mind. He hardened his heart, and then Hashem knew this, and this was part of the plan, and it. In life, he didn't keep his word, and but Hashem knew this, and the question is, why was this part of the whole plan? Why, if Hashem knew he was going to harden his heart each time, why did he even bother with these plagues? And the point is, it was to show the Jewish people that Hashem is in control. He can create miraculous things. And when they were crossing the Sea of Reeds, when Hashem made the water subside with the Jewish people and drowned the Egyptians, they recognized the miracle. But the question is, did they recognize one miracle, the one at the Sea of Reeds? Because I asked this question to someone the other day. Or did they recognize 11, the 10 plagues plus the Sea of Reeds? I don't know if you have an answer to that, Damon.
Just explain to me what you mean properly, Kev, sorry, so I can understand you.
So at the Sea of Reeds, the Jewish people saw the miracle that Hashem split the waters and protected the Jewish people crossed and the
Okay, was
Egyptians
that
drowned.
amongst the 10?
That was a miracle. That
Yeah.
wasn't amongst the 10. You had the 10 plagues against Paro.
So are you
And
putting
we-
a category of 11 miracles versus 10 plagues and a miracle?
Did they recognize all 11, or did they recognize the 1 and the 10, or did they only recognize the miracle at the sea? Or did they actually remember the 10 plagues? Or did they only recognize, remember, or recognize? Yeah.
When I learned the sourcing, all 11, but the categories of 10 were plagues against the Egyptians, and 1 wasn't counted as a plague because they were already technically released. But in other words, the Egyptians had free choice whether to pursue the Jews or not in that case. Whereas with the plagues, at the point where Paro refused to release them and harden his heart, then in that particular case, it was brought unto them, and they didn't have a choice. Here, they actively pursued in the water. They didn't drown by the miracle. They drowned by the lack of the same protection that was given to Israel. So they are in different categories, but they're all miracles.
But the plague of the death of the firstborn, then he let the people go. He let the people go. Then he pursued them. So he did actually, 9 of them he didn't, but the 10th one he did.
I hear.
But the question is, did the Jewish people recognize all 11 did they recognize as they were leaving Egypt, or did they recognize when the water split?
I don't know.
Do you see the question? How's it?
All right, guys, let's get on with this as quickly as possible. So, as you know, the Mishnah presented a law of one who suffered a loss in saving the property of his fellow, that this person was coming with his barrel of wine, and this one was coming with his jug of honey. The barrel of honey cracked, and the honey began to leak out. And the person with the wine poured out his wine from a barrel in order to save his friend's honey in the empty wine barrel. So the Mishnah says he receives only his fee. And what does that mean? The fee for his labor and for the use of his container. Now, he's not reimbursed for his discarded wine, unless prior to saving his fellow's honey, he states to him, I'm only throwing away this wine if you compensate me for the loss of my wine, which is worth a fraction of what your honey is worth. If he doesn't stipulate that and the owner of the barrel of honey agrees, then he doesn't have to forfeit his wine in order to save the honey. And the reason being is he's not compensated automatically, is we said that if you're going to put yourself in detriment and suffer financial loss in order to save your fellow's lost property, you're under no obligation to save his lost property if it's going to cost you. And therefore, since it's not a mitzvah, an obligation, there's not an obligation for a refund of losses. So what would have to happen there is that it would be stipulated by the owner of the wine barrel that he will be compensated. Otherwise, he can only get a labor fee and the fee for his use of his container. Now, we also said that failure of the barrel owner to be present, if it's delivery guys, that there has to be at least 3 Jews that form a ad hoc based in. It seems as though Gavin actually asked a great question. Why doesn't it suffice to have 2 as if they were witnesses? Because I thought about what Gavin was saying, and the thing of it is they weren't witnessing the event. They were actually basically saying, we hereby acknowledge you and compensated for your wine loss. Meaning it's a based in that paskins halacha, that issues a verdict of recompensation. 2 people merely witness an event, and 3 Jews can rule on it. So, Gavin, that's the reason that I thought of. I might be wrong. That was a good question. So we're saying here, the Gemara is taking issue, and it says, well, why should the owner of the wine only be compensated for his labor in the container? Because if you look at it, you could go the other extreme. You could say that, let's say that the owner of the honey is actually no longer the owner of the honey. Why would the honey be in a state of ownerlessness? Because we learned in a brisa that basically, firstly, if it's falling out of a container, in 2 minutes it's actually going to be in public property, and how you're going to scoop it up from the pavement. So whatever you contained, you owned. But if petroleum oil or spills out of the back of a van, and other people attached to it first, it's really very difficult to claim ownership. I think the law has subsequently stated that it's theft. In terms of how you prosecute, that's a different matter. But according to Talmudic law, there's a problem in terms of ownerlessness once it's in the public domain. And how do we know that? There was a brisa that said, look, if you've got oil, a jug full of oil, or you've got a jug of wine, then what happens is you can't designate that as Terumah and Maaser on the produce if there's going to be a problem. In other words, we say, listen, you've got 10 barrels, and you decide that you've got 9 at home, and you're taking that last barrel from Edenvale to Sandringham. And you notice that there's this terrible smell in the car, as if the wine is actually leaking out. And you can see that it's just a matter of a couple of minutes before all the wine leaks out. So you can't in that case say, 1/10 of it is Terumah, or 1/10 of it is Maaser, and therefore I've got 9 decent barrels at home, I've got 10 barrels in total, and let me give the defunct one that's about to become worthless to the Kohanim and the Leviim. Why? Because it puts them in severe detriment, and since you're not able to get benefit from it long term, then why should you disadvantage another party? But more than that, the technical reason is, if it's going to disappear on you where you no longer can use it, one of the definitions of ownership is being able to have use of it as an owner. When it no longer is functional, at that point, what do you own? So therefore, there's this concept of ownerlessness. So therefore, if the person of the honey has it leaking out of a container, the person that saves the honey with his wine could say, listen, I can wait it out. At the end of the day, when your honey leaks, myself, whoever else is on the street can take your honey, keep all of it. So I wouldn't get too cute with the negotiations. All I'm asking you to do is replace my wine, and you save a fortune of money on your honey being wasted. So I could go the other extreme. So what's this issue with Terumah and Maaser? So Maaser is generally given to the poor. We've got the concept today that it is 10% of earnings. As far as Terumah is concerned, that's the tithing that you give to the Leviim. So an Israelite will give 10% of his earnings to the Leviim. Now there's a subsection of Leviim called the Kohanim, and the Levites will give their 10th to the Kohanim. So they have to, that's known as Terumah, and in order to be able to use it, if you don't do that, it becomes tevel. So tevel means you cannot use that produce because it hasn't been tithed in the correct manner. So at the point where it's tevel, you cannot consume it in any way. Okay, very, very straightforward. But you understand the concept of how you can go the other extreme and see it as ownerless. Now, likewise, so that's where we got to at that point. So the Gemara says, okay, so that's a reasonable explanation. And you don't have to save somebody's honey if they're not prepared to reimburse you of the wine, but you have to specify what you wanted, otherwise it's hefker. Now, we said, why doesn't it mention in the latter case of the Mishnah with the donkey? Because according to Rashi, it talks about a case where the owner himself is able to save the donkey. So the only fee you can charge is as if you were a lifeguard to that donkey, and you shouldn't be able to sacrifice your donkey worth 100 zuz in order to save your friend's 200 zuz donkey, unless again you get consensus that he will reimburse you for your 100 zuz loss of your donkey. Otherwise, you will only be permitted to get paid a fee as a lifeguard, basically. So we want to know what the if the Mishnah is saying that the honey stands to be lost once it leaks out of the container, the one who rescued it maybe should be permitted to keep all of it, never mind just getting back the fee for his wine. So again, there was a discussion between Rashi and the Rambam. Kevin mentioned this yesterday as a question, is that Rashi is saying that while it's in the barrel, it's the fait accompli. It's like the Titanic that hit the iceberg. It might not have sunk, but you can consider all the passengers, they're dead by the time they hit the Atlantic and they're not able to be rescued. Or certainly the asset is sunk. As far as the Rambam is concerned, the Titanic is only sunk once it's sunk. And once honey's poured out, at that point it's hefker. But in principle, what we are saying is the owner of the wine, once it's, let's go according to the more obvious perception, according to the Rambam, that once it's in public arena, it's fair game, then in that case, why shouldn't the owner of the wine be able to just keep it anyway? So the Gemara answers, and this is the part we're dealing with today, that Rav Yirmiyah explained a certain brisa. In other words, what does this brisa say? It's going to give a bit of clarity, and it speaks of a case where the netting of the olive press was wrapped around the barrel. So in our Mishnah 2, speaks of a case where there's a barrel of honey, but there's netting. So what's this netting that you've got in terms of honey and olive presses, etc.? That netting is like, Gavin, I don't know if you know what it means, like a sort of sack or a sort of gauze, that if it does, if the barrel is broken, it doesn't all pour out. It almost mitigates the flow of loss somewhat. It's a protective, Arthur, think of the word. It's almost like you're putting it in a sort of sheath to create a very slow pouring out and leakage as a safety measure of the barrel on the outside. So in that particular case, you can't regard the honey as ownerless because it's a very slow process, and therefore it can be considered a high probability that the majority of it will be saved because it will only drip out a little bit at a time. So if the barrel is not rubbed in this netting or protective skin, the owner of the wine can take all the honey for himself. It's only a matter of a second before it leaks out in the public way. So there are certain issues regarding it. Now, the Brisa stated a slightly different teaching and said, and if he did say this, he has said nothing. His designation of the wine and oil as Terumah and Maaser has not taken effect. Okay, so what we are saying is here is that you can't. It's re-speaking about the case as you. Where's Arthur? Kev, where's Arthur?
Kevin, you want to call him?
Let me phone him.
Okay.
Oh, there he is.
Arthur, you okay?
It's on mute. You're on mute, Arthur.
No, it's fine. It's
In the
fine.
supermarket.
As long as you can hear.
No, I'm at Matchlock, and I don't know why it kept disconnecting and reconnecting itself for some reason.
No problem. So
I'm
what?
just pushing Aton around the Matchlock. I'm gonna go
No
back.
problem. So what we've said, guys, is that at the end of the day, if you can't have this principle, we're going back to this principle now. We actually we've gone away a little bit from the Mishnah as far as compensation for the owner of the wine, and we've said, all right, now that we're on a slightly different topic, what's this issue about not being able to dedicate Terumah or Maaser where there are losses involved? Okay, I'm just waiting for Gavin.
Are you saying the honey that's gone out of the barrel, that's obviously there's a loss there. So does one still have to take Terumah and Maaser from that? Is that what
Okay,
you're saying?
so what we are saying is here there are two issues. The first issue is the Gemara was was slightly concerned that the owner of the wine is only, unless otherwise stipulated, entitled to the fee of his labor and the rental of the container. He should be entitled, in fact, to take everything if you take this principle of once it leaks out, it's ownerless, and whoever scoops it up can keep it. And Rashi says, as far as that's concerned, if the inevitable is going to happen, he can even take it from the guy's barrel. Although why the guy wouldn't smack him, I don't know. The point where it hasn't leaked out. Yeah.
In that case, what will be will be.
What will be will
The
be
honey, yeah?
honey. Yeah. So Gavin, the first issue is he could actually say that everything belongs to him of the honey leaking. All he's asking for here is compensation of the wine. So that's the first issue. But what came up as a secondary issue is this concept that if you're going to suffer a loss, you can't say, listen, I've got 90% of the item at home and 10% here. This 10% is going to be null and void, and it's going to leak into the street, and it's going to be no more. So therefore, I don't want to suffer the loss, and therefore I'm dedicating the defective barrel as either Maaser or Terumah to the Levium, or the Levi says, listen, I've got 10 barrels. I'm going to give one of my barrels to the Kohen, and the same principle applies. You're not allowed to give something that's defective for holiness, for spiritual reason. But the other reason is that if it's damaged, the reason why you can't take advantage of it is because if something is defined as ownerless, it means that the owner can't get utility from it. So at the point where the owner can't get utility, you cannot give it over to a third party because it's not useful to you. Therefore, you're not owning any benefit, and therefore you cannot give over that benefit to somebody else. Let me just sorry, you cannot give that to anybody else either. So that's the second issue at play that the Gemara is going to start to say. So and says, look, you've got two issues that we brought up. So this Terumah and Maaser is an issue of the brisa for both wine and oil. So now we're going to get onto a slightly different topic. So oil is worth far more than wine, okay? And we're saying that the one case that we talked about was leakage to eventual loss in a quick period of time. We're saying if it's delayed, that there's netting preventing honey from draining or preventing wine from escaping, etc. At that case, if it's a slow process, you can dedicate that barrel as Terumah or Maaser because it's not going to leak and have huge losses, nor is it going to become ownerless. So if you don't have that netting, you can't designate that for Terumah or Maaser. So it's saying, okay, so that's something that's guaranteed to have a loss. What happens, the brisa is saying, is if you've got another case, is that you're traveling on a road. And on that particular road, you recognize the local robber as walking towards you. Now, you have got a high probability of being mugged and robbed. And therefore, can you say when you see this dangerous situation, all right, I've got 90% of the stuff at home. It's cool. If I get robbed from this, I'm going to dedicate this verbally before an action happens, that the robbery takes place. Can I dedicate this to Terumah or Maaser? Guys, what do you think?
Because if there's probability, and on 99 times of 100, the guy will rob him, then I don't think that he can dedicate it to Terumah and Maaser.
So let's say it's 50-50. Let's say you don't know. That if a person's a thief, it could be that why would he rob you? That he could rob 1 million people on the street. Okay, it's true, it's dark, it's quiet, but he might have had a couple of other people. You got a 50-50. What would you say then?
Maybe because there still is a chance that you might get robbed, probably no again.
Okay, so you've got a 50-50. If for sure it's a 90%, then that is almost having a barrel without netting. It's a fait accompli. Let's say a 50-50. So in that particular case, what would Kevin and Gavin say? No, Arthur can't speak. What would you say, Gav?
So I missed some of it. Sorry, I missed the one part. If you want to either repeat it, I've got an idea, but I need to hear that whole last part again quickly.
Okay. So the first case that it did in the price, it said, for sure, it's guaranteed that if there was no netting on a barrel, it's going to leak out, and therefore, because that loss is guaranteed, it's ownerless, because in a matter of minutes, it's going to leak out, and you cannot give, in order to prevent a financial loss, dedicate that for Terumah or Maaser. Okay, if it's got netting on and it's a slow leak, and there's a very small amount of loss, then in that case you can. But if it's definitely going to leak out, you've got no protection. You don't own what you can't get benefit of. In other words, if the honey goes out the barrel within about 3 minutes, you don't own it anymore, and you can't use it anymore, so you can't give away what you don't own. So that's the legal issue. The moral issue is you shouldn't also, for the Holy Temple, give them the loss and you keep the benefit. Okay, those are the two aspects. So that's for a guaranteed chain of events that's going to happen, where it's only a matter of a few minutes before there's a loss. There's no problem dedicating that if you're going to retard the amount of loss to a few drops and you can save it, because that's as if there's very little loss. So we're saying, okay, that's the first case. The second case is a person's walking on a dark road and the local robber is walking towards him. Not gunning for him, but just walking, and he thinks he's got a 50-50 chance of being robbed. So what he wants to do is quickly make a declaration, say, listen, I'm dedicating this to Maaser. This is one barrel, I've got 9 at home. So this has got a 50-50 chance of being robbed from me. I'm going to quickly dedicate this to either Maaser or Terumah. And then if it goes, it's not my problem. It's the temple's loss. Can you do it if it's a 50-50?
I would say still not. I'd say that it's devious. It's you can't all of a sudden start dictating who's it going to go. I mean, you can't all of a sudden set it aside for what do you call it
For
for the temple, whatever. You can't set it aside for the temple if a robber's coming up to you, because I mean, if that gets stolen, then of course people would do that, because if they're walking in a dangerous area, all of a sudden they'll start allocating everything out to to the temple. You can't do that. You got to, it's got to be stuff that's actually in your possession, and that hasn't got a risk of being taken away from you.
that makes sense. Totally makes sense that
Can I
people
add
would
to that?
always do what's convenient, and I'm sure Kevin, what's your thought?
So, okay, so let's say if he does, before the robber comes into his space and he dedicates it to Terumah, to the temple, even if the robber steals it, it's not the robber's. The robber it has to be taken from the robber by the authorities, even after he's stolen it, because it still doesn't belong to him. Then it still belongs to the temple. Then maybe that's
Okay, so there is a valid point that Kevin's saying, is that let's tweak our example somewhat. If it uses the term robber, we would say that according to, you remember there was different opinions with the Tanna Kamma, Rav Yochanan, Rav Yishmael, etc. And you remember one of the opinions is because a robber is above the law. In other words, he's a gangster. He's not scared of anybody, that even the law can't contain him. We're not talking about the guy at the local pub that had a couple of drinks that decides to take your laptop, because that sort of guy's scared of them, or he just lost his inhibition when he stole from you. But a guy that's a gangster that isn't scared of jail and everything, and will kill the witnesses if it comes to court and everything else, that sort of guy, you can't rely on the law collecting it. So let's refine it to that case of robber, professional robber. So according to an opinion, it's almost as if, remember when we were discussing about a utensil, a kli, that you designate a use as a robber or thief. When you take it, is it your acquisition? And it depends if the original owner had Yush to spare of recovering it. And the opinion there was, as far as the robber's concerned, that's above the law, you would despair because you wouldn't toy with him. Do you remember that opinion? But a robber that was just a casual robber that was drunk and decided to take his chance, him you wouldn't be scared of. You remember that whole issue? And then the thief, the one that tunneled under, you don't know who it is, so you do despair. If you have a few friends over for Shabbos and something goes missing, like your Fabergé egg, it's a sort of thief you can work out who it is with the right sort of questioning. So we'll use the example that, Kevin, the law can't get hold of that robber. So I'm sure in that particular case, Gavin and Arthur and Kevin say that how can you do what's convenient for yourself, that the minute their losses, dedicate that to either tzedakah, which is Maaser, or Terumah to the Kohanim and Levim. So that's a good point from a moral point of view. Let's just see what the legal implications are, etc. So just give me one second. I'm just putting pause on the share. All right. So what the Gemara is saying, look, at the end of the day, if a Jew on the street sees a robber coming towards him and designates his wine or oil as Terumah and Maaser, it doesn't take effect. It's as if he said nothing. In terms, but he knows they're going to be lost. So therefore, why should tzedakah be lost? But it's as if he said nothing in terms of a guaranteed. Just hang on, guys. Let me put it on pause again. Okay. All right, take 14. Okay. So Gavin, the one opinion is that, it's a problem. It's exactly the same case as the case where the wine is definitely going to leak out the barrel. But there is a different brisa that says at the end of the day, you shouldn't do it. In other words, you should not say the Maaser sheni that I have in my house is hereby deconsecrated upon these coins, for the coin stand to be lost. But if he did say it, his words stand. It means the deconsecration takes effect, and you're transferring the Maaser sheni sanctity from the produce to the coins. So we're going to start to work out next session how you can say this case retroactively. In other words, it shouldn't be allowed. Now, I just want to make one thing clear to you guys first, is what's this deconsecration? So if you remember what Maaser sheni is, it's a second time. And what has to happen there is it's got to be taken to Jerusalem, and you've got to eat it there. So what happens is generally, if you've got a whole lot of produce and it's going to go off and it weighs a ton, by the time you get from your side of the, you might be in Babylon, you might be in the other side of Tel Aviv, and you've got a huge amount of weight of produce, and logistically it's difficult. You could have the heat of summer, it could go off, it could go bad. So what you're allowed to do is deconsecrate it by redeeming it with coins, the Maaser sheni. And then what you have to do is it removes the sanctity from that fruit or the produce, etc., and it transfers it to the coins. And then you take those coins once you get to Jerusalem and you buy produce there, and you eat the produce within Jerusalem. So the traveler basically has to deconsecrate the Maaser sheni produce out of Jerusalem in his home. And he's saying, okay, so he's got a barrel full of coins. Now, these coins, can he use these as deconsecration coins that if they get stolen from the robber, it's as if he can save himself a trip to Jerusalem and he doesn't have to redeem those produce that he sold to get the coins and get it there. Do you get what I'm saying? And according to the brisa, he shouldn't do it, but if he does do it, we accept that he deconsecrates the produce, the Maaser sheni, onto the coins that are about to get stolen. And we want to know how that's possible if it's going to be stolen. Okay, so we're going to deal with this next time. I wanted to end 7 minutes early because Gavin's been a very good sport. It wasn't his fault, but we don't want to prejudice him further.
I appreciate it. I've just had a laugh. I appreciate it. Thank you.
You just had a?
I said I've had an entire life of prejudice. So to have
No, one's not going to make a difference. But this one,
no, to leave it out of the shoe is a nice. It's very nice. Thank you.
All right, cheers. We'll take advantage. Cheers, guys. Have a good night.
Yeah,
Damon, just stay on the line for once. I want to talk to you for a minute,
Cheers,
Damon.
guys. Thanks a lot.
Arthur and Gavin sign off.
Guys,